So here's a harder question. How do you see, or do you see racial or sexual bias in the workplace, and where do you see it?
Yeah, I see it a lot. So some of it is stuff that I have to wrestle with, and some of it is I'm careful not to perpetuate. So I'll talk about what I wrestle with. So where I see bias play out is institutionally, because individually, transactionally, there's all this positive energy, right? Where we can say one-on-one, Kathy, thank you so much for being a credit advisor, right? Sally, thank you so much for being open-minded and not shutting the door to me when I applied for the job. Or Terry, thank you so much for telling me to step into the high heels of power and march myself down the hallway. Each of those transactions are great, but this is an institution, right? And we know there's some filter happening institutionally that's providing some kind of feedback to prevent people from different kinds of people from rising up or applying or making it in, or women from moving. So moving to the very top, at least. So the way I feel it play out in my life is in performance reviews, right? Because people can be positive, and then people will say things in performance reviews that are very difficult to communicate in a multicultural environment. One of the things I hear is, well, you kind of make us uncomfortable when you communicate. That's feedback I get, right? Or, we wish you had said that a little differently. And as a black woman receiving that kind of feedback, what I hear is, you're too aggressive, right? Our perceptions of you are that you're aggressive. And it it rattles around in my head like a penny, where I have to really think about it. And the reason why I think some care in communicating feedback through the review process is a very important filter for the business is that's where inadvertently a manager can be communicating biased language to you without realizing it. That's where the filter is happening. And so I have found that I approach review periods not just with the typical employee anxiety of being told that you're good or not good, or you have a future or you don't have a future, but also in receiving some information that it feels a little toxic, right? So another positive transactional part of that experience for me is that Sally thoughtfully hired a coach for me, a leadership coach for me, to bounce these ideas off of, right? So that when something sort of hits me and my little hamster goes off into the wounded little girl space, it helps me process that and give feedback so that I can turn the corner on the ways that an institution will deliver biased messages, particularly through performance reviews. Now, the other side of that is when I deliver performance reviews, I'm very sensitive not to also be an agent of the filter. And I know that with Kim, for example, Kim DeLacy is amazing. She works in the investment team. She has been doing it for 20 years. She's awesome. And I feel like I'm a little aggressive in saying, Kim, you are our leader. As two women who are in the investment group here, you've got to drive us. And I'm going to stand behind you. I won't falter. And so from a gender standpoint, I'm delivering a very intentional and sometimes aggressive, right, Kim? Sometimes aggressive message to say, as women, you can't back down, and as a team, we have to move forward and expect people to communicate with us verbally and non-verbally in ways that aren't biased. So the whole communication and the review process, I think, is where I feel the filter happening. But I'll tell you what an exercise that my leadership coach helped me work through this latest round of feedback. But so let's imagine that you just won $7 billion. Mm-hmm. And you hire one person to manage that $7 billion. How would you like that person to communicate with you? Just shout out some words.
Often.
Often.
Honestly, directly.
Honestly, directly. What
Yes.
else?
No BS.
No BS, right?
Confident.
Confident. What kind of person would you want that person to be?
Super smart.
Super smart.
Experienced. Confident.
Very, very honest.
Honest. Analytical. Integrity.
A lot of integrity, right? Okay, so if you had $7 billion, that's what you'd want. So tell me about the communication culture at the Standard. Shout out some words. Greg won't know who you are. He'll look this way. This will not turn up your ear.
I think it's triangulated.
Triangulated.
If I have a problem with you, it's not okay to go to you. I have
It's
to go to your
hierarchical.
supervisor and
So it might take time to communicate things.
You have to go up the upper levels and then down.
Do you think that people are comfortable with conflict? So what happens when you have $7 billion and you drop that into the environment that you've described? What do you think happens?
Anxiety.
Anxiety. What else?
There's challenges.
What do you think happens when there's conflict?
Just amplifies.
Hmm?
It just amplifies. A lot
Amplifies,
at stake.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then, how do you think that plays out in human behavior?
fear.
Fear on whose part? The manager or the people in the environment? Everybody? Yeah. So the group that I manage handles $7 billion for all of you. I have that responsibility for you. And in executing that responsibility, I try to communicate clearly. I try to communicate often. I try to behave with integrity. I like my brand to be one based on honesty. And from time to time, that means I'm going to hurt your feelings, right? I'm going to say something that will sting a little bit, right? But there's no way to do this job well and not have that happen, right? Here's another question. If you had $7 billion, what kind of decision maker would you want in the person managing that money? Just shout out qualities.
Confident.
Decisive, confident,
Courageous.
courageous, assertive.
Reactive.
So, we have $7 billion, and all day long I'm making decisions. Like Sally calls, okay, what's this? Kim calls, make a judgment. And then I talk to an accountant or an actuary or a product design guy, and that firing continues, right? So they'll say, do you want that? No. And I'll hang up the phone and keep going. Just like that. And so, or someone will say, I don't like this investment idea. And I'll say, that's completely ridiculous because I'm not going to lose Kathy Barclay's money, right? Or I'm not going to have Sally staring me down for losing $100 million. No. And then I move on. But when you put that decision-making style, communication, process into a business that's contemplative, collaborative, it's bumpy. There are sharp elbows that fall around, happen. And so for me, in that feedback process, I try to parse out, are you saying you don't like what I said? You don't like how I said it? Or you don't like that I'm the one delivering this message to you, right? And I think I've been able to parse those out with some work. And I will say that most of the time, my sense is that it's either that you don't like what I've said or that I'm the one saying it.
What's your advice to folks who don't have a leadership coach to help them work through that
Great
process?
Work for Sally. Yeah, find a mentor. I mean, some of that coaching happens with a coach, but Kathy, for example, is a sounding board for me, and I just respect her a lot, and so I go to her and ask her questions. So I say, find a sounding board, and I would also say trust your instinct. If something's not right or it's not squaring with you, it probably isn't right, right? And that's where people go wrong. And here's another very painful thing I've learned. sometimes a place is just not the right place. And it's not going to change. You can beat your head against the wall, you can do all these things, but in the end, if you know, if you're getting feedback that from either your manager or the institution that it doesn't work, at some point you have to choose to have the agency in your life to say, I'm going to change this environment, I'm going to have to go. So I would say find peers, trust your instinct, and then be brave. And sometimes that means change. You know, we'll see. May mean that at some point for you and for me.
Okay, my boss is in the room. Don't make a noise.